So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to session 5 of Nzuko 2022, the Africa Economic and Cultural Week. Less talking, more doing, African development. Today, joining us, we have a selection of panel selection, composing of Ankyo Briggs, Uzoma, Christophe, and Chioma. I am Crystal, your moderator for the day. And just so you know, for those of you joining us now who weren't able to join us for the previous session, you missed a very rich conversation. We will be entertaining a Q&A after the speaker's intervention. Please make use of the chat function and the Q&A function to put your questions to the speakers. We will be entertaining those later. Please also know that all these sessions will be available on our website as of next week, so you can watch, rewatch, and share with people who may be interested in these topics. And all of the information on the speakers and the initiatives that they're making reference to are available on our website, AfricaFora.com, and you can find their bios and everything that they're referring to. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor over to Ankyo Briggs, who is our first speaker for today. She's an award-winning environmental and human rights activist. She's the founder and director of Agape Birthrights, an NGO that promotes human, environmental, and developmental and political rights in Nigeria. In 1995, Ankyo joined the resistance against the dictatorial government of the late General Sani Abacha, and she has committed since to drawing attention to the suffering and the lack of development in the Niger Delta, a region that some of you may already be familiar with, and with their plight, as well as the devastation in the region that is caused by international oil companies and their partner, the federal government of Nigeria, in the venture of oil and gas exploitation. I think this is something that can also resonate with a lot of us today, as we saw in Burkina Faso, miners destroying equipment of a UK-owned company following the situation that has been going on in Burkina Faso. So Ankyo, since 2012, has been producing, directing, and hosting a live phoning radio program called Saving the Niger Delta with Ankyo Briggs. She is and remains an advocate for self-determination, 100% ownership of resources, and calls for a restructured Nigeria. Ankyo, we're extremely grateful for you joining us today, and you have the floor for 8 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And I like your outfit, by the way, Crystal. My second daughter is wonderful. My second daughter is called Crystal as well. So you're in great company. Thank you for inviting me. And how many minutes did you say I have?
8.
8. Okay, good. I need to time myself so that I don't abuse your hospitality. Okay. I am speaking from Nigeria. I'm speaking from the Niger Delta region. I'm speaking from River State. It's the first thing I want to raise, the first point I want to raise for Africa and Africans and Nigeria as a whole is that people like me, someone like me and you, I have found, unfortunately, both when I go out of the country and when I'm at home in Nigeria as well, that we are not Black enough to be Black, and then we're also not white enough to be white. So there is that issue that when you talk of apartheid, maybe people who are full Black and people who are full white will not understand that people like me do have issues because of our God-given heritage of coming from 2 different heritages. So that is a major issue I have found in Africa and outside of Africa for Black people, because I consider myself in my heart and in my soul as a Black person, but I also know that my parentage is split into 2 equally down the middle. So that also is part of a problem that we Africans have to resolve for ourselves, first of all, before we begin to go into the issue of discrimination. Now, the topic that was given to me, development and resources management, immediately brought to my mind the fact that how do you develop and manage your resources when you don't have control of those resources in the first place? So when I speak about development and resource management, this will apply not just in Nigeria. So I may reference Nigeria a lot because I have experience and knowledge in that area, being that I'm from Nigeria, but it applies to all the African countries that have natural resources. When it comes to government and governance, the fact remains that despite the right agitation, if you like, that we have as Africans against where we are today, that started from the issue of colonization. Definitely, I have always believed that you cannot find me if I am not lost. So I've never keyed into the idea that somehow Mungo Park, who was perambulating the oceans, looking for whatever he was looking for, and all the other explorers that came upon Africa, did not find Africa because they were, I mean, you can't find something that is not missing. You definitely cannot find my ancestors because they were not lost, you know. So we need to begin to change our mentality as Africans. Now, we have lots of resources in Africa, and most of these resources that we have, I won't waste time mentioning them, but we all know the different resources that we have under the soil of Africa, in the seas of Africa, in the mangroves and forests of Africa, that belongs to us. And yet, in some cases, for instance, in Nigeria, in the 1999 Constitution, we have a part of the Constitution that says, if you find oil and gas, which is a natural resource, in any part of Nigeria, but in this case, it is found in 4 states in the Niger Delta largely, and less so in other states. And then you have them in Southeast, and then you have it in the Southwest. When you find these resources, oil and gas, it actually belongs to the federal government. So if you find oil and gas where I live today, under my soil, it belongs to the federal government. And yet you have solid minerals that is in majorly the northern part of Nigeria, which somehow does not lay claim. The federal government throws it open for, so to speak, everyone, and yet it is being explored and exploited specifically by people from the northern part of Nigeria. So we're talking about stones, we're talking about gold, and so many other things. Now, these natural resources are priced by the Western world, by Europe, the country, America, put a price on these natural resources that are in Africa. Now, yesterday, we got the statistics that 75% of the cocoa that is produced in the world comes from Africa. And yet, it is only 5% of the over $100 billion of the chocolate market that Africa is involved in. So in Africa, we need to begin to question ourselves that how is it that we own these things and yet we have no say in how these things are priced? Now, for instance, I eat chocolate. I love chocolate and I eat chocolate. And I also must confess that in Nigeria, I do not see made in Nigeria chocolate. And yet the quality process of, say, a bar of chocolate is determined by Cadbury's, for instance, because Cadbury's and maybe one or two other chocolate factories are very known for chocolate. So when the quality is determined, even if it comes down to African wares, clothes made by the materials made in Africa, and the sewing and the styling done in Africa by our tradition and our culture, you still find that the way that our outfit is looked at is more or less as a tourist marvel. It's not looked at as something that can generate dollars. And we have names that are branded. And African materials and African styles, like the earring I'm wearing, it's made of raffia. And people go, oh, that's nice, it's so lovely. Where do you, it's African? Yes, it's African. But that's stop. There's no produced earrings like this, because quality process is determined. But again, we have to begin to be competitive in Africa. We have to be able to finish our products in a way that we raise our own bars by ourselves, for ourselves. Because if you're in private business and you're competitive, then you want to be competitive to the point where the buyer does not really have too much of a choice, apart from the fact that it may be by pricing. You can sell yours maybe $1 less than the other person, but basically the sewing, the quality is the same. So when I look at the problems of development and I look at the problems of resource management in Africa, it brings me to the issue of policies in African countries and political decisions in Africa by Africans. Now, the fact that Nigeria, for instance, is known as a corrupt country, when people want to come and invest, if you like, in Nigeria, what are they coming to invest in? People are telling Nigerians, put your money in Nigeria. It's wonderful. We've heard some entrepreneurs and all of that speak on this program. And if they put their money in what they believe in, for instance, in Nigeria, they generate their own lights. The transportation of whatever they are producing is generated by them at a cost. And so without even being able to get to the level of passing, if you like, the quality processes that the country you want to export to is going to put on you, you're already at a disadvantage. Now, that problem is not a white man's problem. It is the problem of Africans. We've seen, when we look back, we recall people like Thomas Sankara. Is my time finished?
Yes, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments in 1 minute, please. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So basically then, the African problem must be solved by Africans before we can even begin to say that we want to compete in any way, shape, or form. We have a problem, we must solve that problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Of course, the floor will come back to you for additional comments if we need, and there are questions that are going to keep coming. I want to encourage all of the audience to make use of the chat and use the function chat to everyone so that we can get a conversation going. But you can also put your questions using the Q&A tool in Zoom. So let's move on to our next speaker for this panel, who is Uzoma Nganyandi, who will be speaking also to the topic of development and why people of African descent succeed abroad but fail at home. So Uzoma is a trained mechanical engineer with over 40 years of experience in multidisciplinary engineering and management experience. He's a qualified environmental professional and practitioner. He's an expert in for our waste prevention, which is reduce, repurpose, recycle, and reuse, and as well as a circular economy expert lead. He is an expert in design, specification, construction, and commissioning of waste to energy plants, waste heat recovery units, and a variety of other areas, including continuous emission monitoring systems and firefighting systems, pollution abatement control systems, etc. So Uzoma, thank you so much for joining us today for this panel. You have the floor for the 8 minutes on why people of African descent succeed abroad but fail at home. A bold statement, but no doubt one that you can back up.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Uzoma.
How are you? I am of Nigerian descent, grew up in Cameroon, went to school in Germany and the USA, and live currently in Luxembourg. I have learned about this morning, and I think that the term we've chosen was kind of disproved by Chibu and John in their success. So, which means that there are success stories. However, you can see that they achieve because of their resilience and their perseverance. That is my takeaway. Now, I will want to take us back to 1914, 1915 in the initiative of Chief Sam in Oklahoma during the Return Back to Africa Pan-African Movement campaign. And actually, I want to read a statement that was made by one of the slaves who returned to Liberia in 1914, 1915. He said, after returning, the Afro-Americans were indeed given a friendly reception by the local Africans they met, which happens to us today when we go home on a 3 weeks or 2 weeks holidays. But already at the emotional climax of the journey, they must have experienced an embarrassed disenchantment, as they suddenly realized, at least subconsciously, that they left behind them an industrialized society with a higher standard of living, and that material consideration weighed more heavily than sentimental bonds to Mother Africa. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that the story of diaspora has already existed, and there are people in the Pan-African movement which started its first meeting in 1781, ending up in 1958 on the African soil with the last Pan-African Congress that took place. So it has been there before. It has been there before. So you find out that we fail maybe because we are too much used to living conditions that are bigger than what we have, that are better than what we have at home. And despite the voluntary segregations that we live out here, many of us were ready to settle for this segregation. Our sister Anaka mentioned appetite amongst us, hatred and everything. So you find out at the end of the day that going home is a good thing, but you have challenges going home. And I want to go to one of the challenges. So you have language, the body language. When you go to Nigeria to set up a business, for example, you find out that there is no one-stop shop. There is, but you have to pay a bribe for it to get it done. There is hatred, the language, there is no courtesy in the language. There is the ethnic hatred that makes people challenges, hatred and challenges that makes people believe that we don't belong to each other. You are hindered trying to set up something. There is another point, the reception. Like those who went to Africa in the 1914-15, the reception, family ties, relationship, welcoming culture, you are seen as an ATM machine. People lie to you, people come to you and tell you stories to get what you have brought to invest in a business, what you have set up in a business to rip it out of you in the name of extended family relationship. The welcoming culture is not of giving you a support to succeed, but to extort you. And because you are not knowledgeable enough. You've been out for too long, wanting to make things happen like you landed in the countries you've lived. You fail because you don't see this. You hear lies, you hear thefts. If you have a poultry, they will ask you for a chicken and you tell them no, but you cannot take this chicken because it's for sale. They will go and kill that chicken and come back to eat with you. Boss, the chicken is dead. Can I have it? You know, and then the same thing happens with egg. If you have a pig farm, they will sell the pig and kill it and give you backstory. So you try to create jobs and you find that the remittances, the efforts these people make when they go home, it's only for sub-existence and not for economic growth. People back home want immediate gratification. We are not trained to go through resilience and perseverance to understand how we can grow wealth. 3 weeks holidays, 2 weeks holidays back in the home country is not enough to give you knowledge of all these things. I know people in Germany, in the UK, in myself, who have been home, tried to set up stuff and had to leave because we felt our families deserved a better life than they were having in the country. So you have embedded, willful, and mean bureaucratic system that hinders you in everything you want to do. The government is not supportive of what you're doing. And then the diaspora investment and startups that go there, as we all know, if anybody wants to set up a business, you need 4 factors that is business enabling for you to start up. You need security. If you take the case of Nigeria, it's a very serious problem right now. You have a free justice system, which is very much in setting up a business. You have property rights. Our sister Nzuko mentions oil you find in the back of a yard, which belongs to somebody else. But in some other part of the country, things are handled differently. These are not encouraging signs for any investor, because you see that it's like in the animal farm. Some people are more equal than others in how it happens. And then finally, you need an educated, experienced, qualified workforce to go with. All these things are available, but they cheat to win. They cheat to win. So you find people where the diaspora efforts are not recognized. Even if you come in as a diaspora specialist in whatever area and you're applying for a government job, you are told by the permanent secretary to bring a white guy with you. Because if you come alone, they might not take it through. You have to bring a white guy to come and speak on your behalf. So you lose recognition from your own people. The hate, in fact, the people you go through with to get things done, they are not even supporting your effort as a Black Nigerian. So, Sister Nzuko, it's not just the biracial appetite you experience, it is also the Black to Black appetite and hatred that is very much prevalent. And most people who have lived in free economies and in free societies would not tolerate this because it guides to failure. Then you have the infrastructure. The internet is not working, not to talk about IoTs, Internet of Things, services, the traffic jam. If you have a business meeting in Lagos at 10 o'clock and you're staying at Badagry, you have to wake up at 5 o'clock to make sure you're in the meeting. You get the meeting on time. Nobody has ever taken time to calculate and measure what traffic jams cost Nigeria, if we have to take the Nigerian example. And this is something that goes in the billions of dollars, not Naira. If you take the traffic jams that happens in the country,
Uzoma, sorry, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, so basically you have distrust, you have lack of infrastructure, utility supplies. So people fail or leave due to deception after having tried. And as we know, one of the reasons they leave is because those who have tried to fight the tiger in the past ended up in the tiger's stomach. And then one of the reasons, so thank you, that's it.
Thank you so much, Uzoma. So Of course, can I encourage the audience to start putting your questions in the Q&A? I see some have started coming in. I encourage people to also keep making use of the chat for comments to what they're hearing, what they agree with, what they disagree with. And in the meantime, I will move on to our third speaker for this session. Christophe Ndayiragije, sorry for mispronouncing your name if I have. Christophe, thank you so much for joining us. You are a Burundian based in South Africa at the moment, where you studied business management, and you're currently a businessman and a Pan-Africanist and an author of the book, Africa, Rising Economic Power, Sooner Than Expected. Christophe is also the founder of MAFI, the Movement for Africa's Financial Independence, and he will speak to us today on promoting Africa's financial independence, which is very apropos based on the comments that the two previous speakers have made. And hopefully we can get from this and continue to get from this less talking and more doing and actions and solutions to push Africa closer to achieving its economic and social development. Christophe, you have the floor for 8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your invitation for this year, and we really appreciate your work, especially Madam Winfried. And we really appreciate your work. It's true, we have got an organization which is based in South Africa, but now I'm in Burundi, in my beautiful country. You excuse me, there's some backlash with the internet. And our intervention is based on this book, which is Africa, the Rising Economic Power, which is on Amazon. It speaks about the Africa's and financial independence, which we believe is the key point that we have to target now, as we used to target. We did target in the 1960s, the African political independence. This is a call. In fact, the book is about a call. It is not like speaking just we are, as Pan-Africanists, we are called to urgently act on this Africans' financial independence. Is a call for all 54 African leaders, African presidents, to urgently meet at the African Union and create continental taxes. You might call them continental contribution, whatever it can. We can, and to be able to collect taxes or contribution to every single good and services that are exchanged in all 54 African countries. For that, we may be able to create our own World Bank. This is a key. This is very important. All the problems will be resolved sweet after we fix this financial independence. We'll be able to collect 30 to 50 billion dollars every year, which almost half $1 trillion every 7 years. Why is this is possible? Yes, it is possible indeed, because when you look, for example, in 1970 to 1994, Nigeria has created what was called a Mandela tax. A Mandela tax was 2% that they used to charge to all the employees of the government. They managed to collect it.
I'm so sorry. Can I maybe encourage you to move your microphone a little bit away? We could hear you, but it might be a bit better if you can move just the microphone a little bit away from your mouth. Yes, sorry. Sorry. Yes, this is.
It's fine now? You can hear me properly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so am I have to repeat? It's great? It's fine?
No, please continue. The Mandela tax.
Okay, so they created what they call Mandela tax. It was charging 2% to all the employees of the government. They managed to collect $61 billion in 2 decades. And the GDP of Nigeria at that time, 1990s, was $50 billion. Now it's almost tenfold, which is almost $500 billion. So all the 20 past years in all African countries, GDP has grown tenfold. Europe has grown twofold. So if Nigeria has managed to collect $61 billion alone on that time, we are capable of collecting $500 billion every 7 to 10 years. This is very important, that we create our own World Bank. That's the key. We can call it African Infrastructure Fund. For that, we might be able to have to fix the continental infrastructures which are under Agenda 2063 projects. So why do we have to do that? Because remember, Europe tax 3 times more than Africa to every single good and services since long time. It's not because they are rich and so on. They used to use tax to fix problems, for example, on war time and so on, fix their economies. They managed to use taxes as our European taxpayers suffers to conquer Africa. It is time now for African taxpayers to suffer and conquer and protect and rebuild Africa. Africa has built a lot of a continent. It is time now to do it ourselves. All the projects that we have done before, they fail because we keep expecting money from abroad. This is very, very, very important. For to do that, all African presidents must act all together under African Union, not one, to avoid assassination like the case we see with Muammar Gaddafi. So we have to be African, Pan-Africanist, to go behind and push the African Union to do that urgently. Because why urgently? This is not because it's nationalism or it's something nice to do and so on. We are in trouble. We are in big trouble because our continent is about to hit 3 billion people by 2060, and we hit 4 billion people by 2090, around there. That is dangerous. The only generation can do that. It is us to push in the table the African Union. Those people, that institution belong to us. We have to go there. We are preparing ourselves to our movement to go there to every assembly, general assembly of the African Union, to make sure that we divide our leaders, we push them into the corner to the level that they create continental taxes. You will ask me that it is true, what will happen with the corruption? Yes, there's negativities for sure. There's negativities on this, but we have been taxing our people since 1960s. We can do that. There's no excuse. We can do that. Then Australia is using the private sector to do that. You can use private sector to collect the taxes in exchange of 10 or 20%. So now we know where to get our money. Let's go now to see what we have to do with this money. If we can create this our own bank with this $500 billion every 7-10 years, we will now go to the second point to build integrated high-speed railway and Grand Inga Dam. These are two projects which are under Agenda 2063. Why integrated high-speed railways? Is because it will connect all capital cities with high-speed railways, which means we will move from Nigeria to South Africa within 1 day, not 2 weeks. From Ethiopia, from Angola, we move from 2 hours and so on. This is very key. And the second point is that Africa is too big. Africa has got 30 million kilometers square. It has got 1.3 billion people. And Africa surface area is equal to United States surface area. You add to Indian surface area, you add it to China surface area, you add it to Argentina surface area, you add it to European Union surface area, which has got 29 something million kilometers square. But their people, the population is 3.6 billion people, which means Africa is empty. We have 1.3, there are 3.6 billion people. Africa is empty, which means the productivities that we do, for example, here in Burundi, the productivity of a lot of mangoes, a lot of bananas in Uganda, and a lot of milk in Uganda, and potatoes here in Rwanda, next in Rwanda, and so on. We don't get where to distribute. We don't get where to distribute this. It's end there because you cannot transport this good from one urban area to another urban area. It is a big problem. So the problem is not the productivity. No, not at all. Whatever can boost them, you can boost all the productivities. You end up with 20 million markets somewhere in the corner. So, and also the continental trade agreement will absolutely fail if we don't have integrated high-speed railway, because we have like a continent which is like a Congo DRC, which is big enough, but they don't share goods to every provinces because they lack infrastructure, like kind of like a continental trade, this integrated high-speed railway. So we know where to get money. We know how to build this integrated high-speed railway. The third reason for this integrated high-speed railway is that 30% of African countries are landlocked. They are landlocked, and 14 of them are the poorest country in the earth. But they are the richest countries in the earth. among the richest countries in the earth in terms of minerals. And if they access the costs, they will be able really to increase their good, even if they help people, other countries financially. For example, if my country here in Burundi, they've discovered, like for example, nickel, which is almost 250 million tons. This cannot be exported because there's a lack of reaching the cost.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments. Please finish your example.
Okay, so now the Grand Inga Dam will be also the second one, because 40% of African countries has got less than 1,000 megawatt for electricity. So we are able to finance that, and we were able to build our own African continental trade agreement, which now will be successful, and we'll be able to do industrialization as we have to do for others. So we are lacking money, we are lacking finances. We are calling you all Pan-Africanists to join us. You go to the African Rising Soon TV, you get much more. It was a small time to speak about this, that we can be able to act. And this is a call, it's a divine call. I'm not a pastor, but we can go down, deep down in here. It won't fail. The Lord wants us to be free financially, and believe me, it won't fail. We say thank you.
Thank you so much, Christophe. Thank you for this inspiring and very insightful. I think the numbers and the framing that you've given on, the frame of within which Africa is operating, the capital, human capital that we have, and also what has been done in the past, and how much we can levy. And I think there's a good question that's come in regarding the tax and the infrastructure that could support such taxing, but we'll come to it in a second. Before I take the questions, and I want to keep encouraging the audience to put these questions in the Q&A and using the chat function. I see there are quite a few comments coming in from one of our former speakers from yesterday's session as well. I want to introduce our last speaker for this panel, Chioma Phillips. Chioma, thank you so much for joining us today. Chioma Phillips Irewolede is the editor of Mzingi Africa magazine and the host of Mzingi Africa Television. Together with her husband Samuel, they are co-authors of the book People Called Africa, Rebuilding the Africa of Our Dream, Africa with a K, stylist with a K. So she believes passionately in the critical role and the place of Africa and Africans. And she's working towards the transformation of the mindsets that will lead to the realization of the fulfillment of Africa's full potential. Chioma leads the online platforms Mzingi Africa magazine and Mzingi Africa Television that aim to share the true story of Africa, overturn the stereotypes and propaganda about the continent and its people. The medias try to highlight Africa to inspire, encourage, uplift, remind, and motivate Africans and the diaspora to be an active part of the change that the continent needs. And I think this is very much in line with comments that have come today, but also with the session that we had earlier looking at an African narrative, and it's very much in line with the vision and passion of AfricaFora, which tries to rework the narrative and place citizens, African and the diaspora at the heart of the conversation. So Chioma today will be talking to us about taking Africa beyond the socioeconomic apartheid. Chioma, thank you so much for joining us today. Happy Africa Day, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Winifred. Thank you, AfricaFora team, for this opportunity. Greetings to everyone who's here, fellow panelists. Happy Africa Day to everyone. Interestingly, the African Union, formerly known as the Organization of African Unity, will be 60 years old next year. But in 1960, over a dozen African countries gained their independence from colonialism. And when my husband and I started Mzingi Africa magazine, we started to use the analogy of a 60-year-old man who was able-bodied, well-educated, and yet strangely unable to take care of himself, unable to tie his shoelaces, unable to prepare a meal, unable to take care of his family. And that's how we compared Africa today with, that's how we presented Africa today as an example, because when you look at the continent of Africa, with all of the PhDs and the master's degrees and the undergraduate degrees and all of the diplomas and all of the skills, all the people who graduated from high school, there is no logical reason why Africa should be in the state that she is in currently. It just does not make sense. So we understood at Msingi Africa that there's something wrong with the mindset of the African, that they have all this skill and all this ambition and all of this interest in actually having a life that is different from the one that they have. And yet they seem to be unable to make the necessary moves to be able to transform the continent of Africa. So why is that? There's a combination of things at play here. The first is internal. Some of the things that Uzoma mentioned are mainly to do with mindset and attitude and self-belief. For a long, long time, the African has been mentally plagued by external forces that seek to keep Africa in subjugation to it. Forces from the West, forces from the East, who find it easier to navigate an Africa where the people of Africa are not really fully in control of their resources, not fully in control of the management of their governments, not fully in control of their own personal management. And so what has happened is they have very deliberately engaged in an underdevelopment of the people of Africa, turning people against each other, starting wars, bringing economic hardships, causing situations and circumstances where even the political leaders themselves are unwilling or unable to engage and do what is necessary to move Africa where she needs to get to because of fear of political assassinations. And these are real things. And so you have an intimidated African with low self-esteem who has forgotten the basics of what an African is meant to be, has forgotten the basics of love and Ubuntu, who is more interested in stealing 80 billion naira to keep for himself than understanding what 80 billion naira can do for over 100 million people to transform their lives. He wants to keep for himself, barely for his family, mostly for himself, and raise himself up, but not raise up the community. That's one thing. The other thing is what is happening externally. Externally, there is a very deliberate attempt to control conversations and narratives and perspectives. Here's what I mean. When we speak to people, because of the platforms in the Africa, people in the diaspora, there is a carefully managed narrative about Africa. There is indeed a carefully managed narrative about every single country and every single continent, very deliberately so, in order to manage how people relate and how people integrate or do not integrate. And so Africa has been portrayed as weak, sick, diseased, war-ridden, corrupt, inept, unable. And therefore, why would anybody in their right minds invite such an Africa to sit at the global table and have discourse on an equal footing as everybody else? They wouldn't. So we have people in the diaspora who come and visit countries in Africa and then say to us, do you mean that Africans are actually manufacturing things themselves? Do you mean to tell me that Africans can actually create great products that can be used and exported outside of the continent of Africa? How is that possible? But it has been happening. So there is a lack of self-belief on the African side, and there's a lack of belief in the Africans from people outside. And so everybody has this false, we have to go and rescue the poor Africans who don't know what they're doing. They're so dirty and filthy, they can't take care of themselves. They're all going to die because of COVID, because you know how poor and dirty and filthy Africa is. You have that perspective on the outside. And then on the inside, you have people who believe that they're not worthy or they should exploit people like Uzoma who are coming to invest back home because that's the easiest way to get a buck. Why? Because they have forgotten who they are. So what are we going to do in order to bring Africa out of this nonsense and this mess? We have to fix the mindset. We have to take our people back to the place where they understand who they are. We have to bring our people back to the place where they are willing to die for the continent of Africa. The initial wave of independence that was won or ceded by the West so that Africa could get on with her own affairs only brought forth a generation of people who wanted comfort and ease, not a people who wanted to fight for the next level of independence against the neo-colonialists or against the globalists. And so we have weak-willed people who are seeking cushy lives and cushy existences to take care of themselves and just live high-polluting lives that are based on madness that was presented by Hollywood. And that's all they want to do. Yes, Uzoma, they want a quick buck. All they want to do is get for themselves as fast as possible, which is what they see their politicians doing and so on and so forth. So you have that has to change. People need to be willing to die for the continent of Africa again. People need to be willing to change the continent of Africa. They are not willing. They want to complain and talk and whine. They have to be willing to do the work. They have to be willing to step forth, like some of the panelists we've seen today, and actually make a difference. They have to be willing to put their necks on the line, and they have to, more than anything, be willing not to take the glory for it. A glory seeker sets himself apart as a target. But when we empower 1 billion or 1.3 billion Africans to know what to do, to have the tools necessary to change and transform the continent of Africa, that is an unstoppable force, a powerhouse, which is what is really Africa's identity. And that Africa can transform the world. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Chioma. Thank you for that. Those were inspiring comments, and I think they also they say what a lot of us think and do not say and should say, because that's the only way we're going to start naming and shaming, which everyone may not agree with, but I think is necessary if we want to be able to change things and actually keep our leaders accountable. So I apologize to everyone, speakers and audience alike, for the delay. We will be extending this session a little bit before we start the next session on reconnecting with diasporas, because we do want to entertain a bit of a Q&A. There are some questions that have come in through the chat already, so I'll just, without further ado, already post those to the speakers. So a first question that came in from Tatenda to Ankyo. Thank you so much for your comments. And the question is, resource management is a tale as old as resource management, diverted resource management is a tale as old as colonialism, and that the entire continent can resonate with. Do you see the end to this vicious cycle? And if I may add myself, how? How do we finally end this, and how do we reclaim it? You've already hinted to some elements in your speech, so maybe I can keep you to a super quick answer to this question, Ankyo. Thank you.
I definitely see an end to the vicious cycle, but that end is going to come directly from us, from you and I. We have to do it by accepting that we need to make these changes. For instance, Mali is throwing France out, and rightfully so. We know what has happened to our people, to Africa, to Nigeria, that has been colonized, the control they still wield over the African countries that they have colonized and continue to colonize even in independence. But I'm really afraid that in throwing out France and all of this, we are actually and have opened up the continent to Russia and to China. And I think that in terms of what we have suffered in the 18th, 19th, and even 17th century, compare what we're going to suffer under people like China and Russia. I am afraid that any African countries that think Russia and China is somehow going to be better than America, than Britain and France is hugely mistaken, because they control the value of our economy under the guise, under what they take out of Africa. So it's up to you and I, it's up to all of us in Africa to understand. We need to understand what we are confronting today, right now. Look at Russia and Ukraine. That is going to happen in Africa if we don't stop it. The Chinese and Russians are going to be worse than the British and the French.
Thank you so much, Ankyo, and thank you for keeping the time. I have another question, again, that's coming from the chat for Christophe. You spoke about a variety of ways that we can achieve financial independence for Africa. And one of the questions has come in and asked, do African Union countries or African countries in general have the infrastructure existing to levy the income tax that you propose? Or do you suggest consumption taxes? But those would affect the poorest population significantly.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. When you speak about continental taxes, taxes is scary. It's a scary point, but we can call it contribution, whatever we can call it. But you must remember that we're in the state of emergency. We better do something to have finances. And remember, I was giving an example of Nigeria for continental Mandela tax to liberate South Africa. It was 2%. It was 1980s, 1970s. The Nigerians, they were dancing, giving that money, knowingly that there was emergency. We can turn all the questions we spoke, we will speak tomorrow. We end up seeing that our weakness is financial dependence we have. So we have to fix that. We can say, okay, there's a corruption. We can use the private sector in exchange of 10%, collecting that money and being free from Chinese and from the Western. That's the first key we must do. If we miss that, we keep going and going, and this is terrible. We're gonna eat each other for the next 20 to 30 years, because we have people. The people we make, these 3 billion people, are already born. They are there, and the birth rate, we know it is 4 now. So we know that these people are there to make these other babies. So we have to make sure that we have this continental taxes in place, and we enlarge all the 54 market to be one market under trade agreement, because they can do nothing without those infrastructures. As I said, the continent is too big. We cannot exchange good. We're going to exchange poverty. Then we see clashes than ever seen before. This is very, very important. And when you say poor people, no, we've been, we on the informal sector, we don't even tax on the informal sector. And many experts are saying that Africa is losing more in not taxing its people than corruption. So we have to go deep down there and seek, where do we have money? Why do we have to knock somewhere? Money is the same money. Go back to our continent. We seek our money. We go slowly, efficiently. We go efficiently and make sure that the money, obviously the money we used to tax, for example, in Nigeria, before, it's not the same as now. Corruption, of course, is there, but it's not as bad as before, where a president could steal the whole money and go and give to the whole family. So there's something which has happened positively. So we have to take chance and start from somewhere, create our own bank and IMF. This is the very key. We must fight. Please join us, and we have to go and act, not to speak. We've been speaking a lot. We must get our money, and we follow many things we follow suit.
Thank you so much, Christophe. I have a question for Uzoma. For your comments. I think you were actually able to bring substance to what you claimed, that why Africans fail at home but succeed abroad. And I had a double question in the hopes that you can answer it very quickly, which is, when we're analyzing why Africans fail at home, are we not failing to pay attention to the flawed system that places a lot of obstacles rather than place a lot of the blame, quote unquote, on Africans? And also, can the successes of the diaspora that succeeds abroad be somehow replicated at home? What is this shift, or how does the shift come about? Or is it only that you believe that the shift needs to come, as you said, from subsistence and immediate gratification to seeking economic growth?
Firstly, if I may say, we are not the only persons confronting obstacles when we try to set up and start up things. Many other nations are. What we need is perseverance. And I think that going forward, Africans need to take their destiny into their hands. There is no other way out. People are ready to invest in Africa. Diasporas are ready to invest in Africa, but the challenge they face trying to do business in Africa, especially in Nigeria, is tremendous. So if we have to make a way out, we have to make sure we do first things first. And first things first, meaning creating an environment which is conducive for diaspora people to come in. It's not just diaspora people leaving the country. Doctors are leaving, nurses are leaving, ICT specialists are leaving the country. I'm talking now specifically in the case of Nigeria, which I know very well. Look at what is happening in Southern Cameroon. We are killing each other. Sister Aneko mentioned China and Russia coming in. But if you look at what is happening in Europe, you see that there is a wide force coming up, 30 countries uniting, and each time they meet, we are sitting on the side table, like Chioma said. We are sitting on the side table because we have no voice. We are not united. Our governments don't take us seriously. Other nations, Chinese recruit Chinese students in the diaspora while they are still in the university to go back home and work. Japanese do the same. They recruit them and they are proud to go to work in their country. Christoph, you mentioned the Inga Dam. I was in a conference in ACP in Brussels where we talked about it. What prohibits African countries to create a consortium to finance the Inga Dam? Inga Dam will give electricity to all of Central Africa. All of Central Africa, if realized. But it's not happening, and we are waiting for crumbles from the table. The fact of the matter, Christoph, if I may come back to what you're saying compared to what the diasporas are doing, Africa has enormous potentials in her diaspora who are doing good work out here, who want to invest in the country. But you have to give them a level playing field back on the continent to exercise. We have to unite. We have to create our. So if you go back to 1944 to Bretton Woods, what happened in Bretton Woods? There was no single African country there, and it's still happening today. And we have people in power who don't even realize the economic power. Like Samantha said yesterday, we have to go back and own financial value chains on the continent for we to progress. So basically, Sister Moderator, if I have to come back to your question, the fact of the matter is that Africa can only be developed by Africans. Anybody coming to Europe from the Western world is coming to make quick money. There is no free lunch out there, and we need to support our people in the diaspora to make a difference on the continent, financially, economically, and politically. And we need policy regulation, legislative, that protects African interests first.
Okay, thank you, Uzoma. One last question for Chioma. I know you're still with us right now. So 50, 60 years after independence, thinking to your analogy about the 60-year-old man. So 50, 60 years after independence, sorry. What are the remnants of colonialism, not colonization, in Africa? And how does this affect us and prevent us from achieving, or from moving from talking to doing, rather?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that? I don't hear one.
So 60 years after independence, what are the remnants of colonialism in Africa that prevents us from going from talking to doing?
Oh, okay. Pretty much everything, because what happened with with African governments is they didn't actually make a move to transform at independence. In fact, in our book, we call it faux independence. It wasn't a real independence. What happened was that Western countries realized that they were about to face such hostility, they would never, ever be able to engage with the continent of Africa again. And so they said to themselves, we need to make a strategic retreat here. And so they gave, in quotes, and you should see my face right now, it's a good thing I can't be on camera, they gave Africans independence. And African governments then became their subtle puppets, maintaining colonial policies, maintaining colonial methods and instruments. And then when the neo-colonialists arrived in the same form, because it's the same countries, offering aid and offering donor funds and, coming in to offer loans and interventions because they so wanted to help these helpless Africans. The presidents, the new prime ministers, and so on and so forth, basically rolled over and handed over control of their governments, which is why you find a situation where a country like Kenya will take a loan from the IMF and then hand over all policy making to the IMF. And so we are suddenly increasing our fuel prices. We are suddenly changing how our education is being done. We are suddenly changing how business is done. We are taxing in a certain way. We are deciding that 3,000 people are going to be laid off work just because the IMF has said, let us restructure. Africa never created its own way or platform. It simply did away with what was really African. Capitalism was never African. I'm not advocating socialism or any of these other isms. there was always a way that Africa had. And if you look, for instance, at indigenous ways of fundraising or community pooling of resources, like in Nigeria, there are ways where people on the ground, at the grassroots level, are able to put money together and help each other to be able to become financially independent, or at least attain goals that are impossible without working together. You pool your resources and you share those resources, and an individual is able to go ahead and achieve a certain result and then come back and give back into the pool.
Thank you.
Why is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can talk for
Go
hours.
ahead, just wrap up.
Okay, so why is it that Africa has not just said, hang on a second, the West has its ways, the East has its ways, Africa must have its way in order for Africa to bring its own unique voice to the table. And that can be derived very easily from Ubuntu. And there's a way to do it. I'm here in case anyone has any other questions, and I can share a lot of resources. Thanks for that question.
Thank you, Chioma. And I can hear baby over there agreeing.
So sorry if I can add in something, if you excuse me for a second. Thank you so much, Phillips, and I greet you and I say thank you for the last video of you. And
thank you.
yes, so and I wanted to call really this last question he was asking to Phillips. Crystal and Madam Winfred and Phillips, how can you push Pan-Africanists much more further to look at those ideas that are coming within them and make sure that we go further and organize much more meetings, pragmatic meetings? How do we go about it? Because remember, whatever we say against leaders, they can do nothing without activists. They can do nothing. They will go there, they will get paid to the African Union, and if you don't push, most of the politicians, they're acting because there's something behind the activists or NGOs, local NGOs that are pushing them. So you are young, you can push us and go further organizing us and go and push to the African Union that belong to us, to some of the diaspora points, for example. Then we look at how to push and succeed in all this that we are speaking about, Africa's financial independence. That's why we don't act. We wait for our leaders to act. But remember, African leaders are in prison. They're in prison. They can do nothing. You have been seeing they are the most who are attacked, killed every day. What do you think they're killed for? They've been trying. So let's make them act in one thing as one. And we are the only one that can go and do that as activists behind our organization. We cannot create any other organization. Whatever we can do, the African Union is our own body. Let's go behind and speak to them every day and night. Than speaking on TVs, only speaking and complaining. We must act urgently. Otherwise, as I speak, we are in trouble. And people will see that we didn't do anything in our generation.
Thank you, Christophe. That is precisely what AfricaFora hopes to do and hopes to do through these conversations, but also behind the scenes and facilitating these conversations and pushing our leaders to these actions. Perhaps I can take one last question for Ankyo, if you're still, with us, and then I'll have to bring this conversation to a close. Could you speak more very, very briefly on the obstacles to self-determination and ownership of resources in your personal experience in the Niger Delta? Could you tell us a bit more of the obstacles that you've been able to overcome more specifically so that we can, extract best practices from your work, if you don't mind?
Okay. Unfortunately, the work involves first sensitizing people. When you're talking about self-determination, people have to understand what you mean by self-determination. There is a misconception in Nigeria that is being driven that when you talk about self-determination, that you're actually outright saying, I want to break away from Nigeria. No, it's not easy to break away from a country in which you already exist, but it is possible to break away. But the self-determination can actually take place within the country where you actually are part of. For instance, the United States, I'm not in any way comparing Nigeria to the United States, because there is no comparison in terms of how their policies are, how they come about their policies and how effective those policies are to the lives of their citizens. So, but Nigeria is a federation, or is supposed to be a federation. And so if therefore you have accepted to run a country, a federated country, then it means that each of those 36 states in Nigeria should be able to control and own their resources, manage their resources, make political decisions for themselves, like America does with their different states. You have state police, and you have you take care of the health of your people. You don't go from Texas to California, for instance, because unless if what you're looking for medically is not available. So basically, therefore, our people need to understand that self-determination is a basic human right in any part of the world. And if it is a basic human right, the ownership of resources is a basic human right. And we must agitate and take a hold of these things within the space of our country. And we should stop electing politicians that emerge because they can't find anything better to do. Politics is about service to the people, and democracy is about delivering the rights of the people as and when the people want them. It's been difficult. It's not easy. It's life-threatening. It's dangerous to speak on issues like self-determination in Nigeria. All over the world, people are seeing what's going on in Nigeria right now, where the political elections that are coming up in 2023, we do not believe it is going to be fair. When I say we, I mean people from the South. Do not believe it is going to be fair. We do not believe it is going to be credible. We just believe that a cabal of people will determine what will happen in 2023 and who will have the political power in 2023. So we're just back to square one.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think this brings to a close our conversation on less talking, more doing, although we have done a bit of talking. Chioma, do you have a final comment? But if you do, it has to be super brief.
Super brief. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the indulgence. I just wanted to comment on something. Someone asked Christophe a question about whether Africa has the infrastructure to blah, 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 the taxes. I just want to address the issue of does Africa have the infrastructure? The reality is that we have everything that we desire. What I mean is that when we make up our minds, what can stop us? Have you ever seen determined Africans producing results that amaze you? Yes, all over the continent and wherever we are in the world. So Africa has everything that it desires. So if there is no infrastructure for the raising of funds that is going to build the continent, it is because we have not yet reached that point where we are dying for it like we need oxygen. Anything that we want in Africa, any change, any building can happen because of the passion that we have for our continent and our people. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. And I think you've summarized the session perfectly. I was going to try and link everything, but I think that's essentially we have the knowledge, we have the people. Just looking at this panel, we have all the people that we need. I hope that this conversation, most of the findings from this conversation will be highlighted in a communique that will be shared after the conference. But I hope that we can continue after this conversation to align and work together behind the scenes in furthering the things that we've discussed, in lobbying the right people that we lobby, or doing the things ourselves to make the change that we need to see in implementing the tax that we discuss, in pushing forward self-determination, in facilitating people in Africa to be able to succeed as they do abroad, and to emancipating from socioeconomic apartheid. So thank you so much to our panel today for joining us for this conversation. I want to thank everyone in the audience as well for their patience. We will be moving to our last session of the day, that is reconnecting with diasporas. But again, thank you so much for our speakers for today. I especially want to thank Mzingi Africa Magazine, who is a partner of the conference of Nzuko 2022, and who has graced us with their presence today through Chioma Phillips and her wonderful comments. So I would like to encourage all the audience to stay tuned. We'll be starting in just a short minute, session number 6, with our speaker Yinka Olaya and Sanya Jurjulov on reconnecting with the diasporas.